Don't let him cook tonight." The words came so quietly that Andrew Whitmore almost missed them beneath the soft clink of crystal glasses and the distant hum of the kitchen. He turned toward the voice and found 8-year-old Nia Carter standing at the edge of his dining room, her neat braids falling over the shoulders of her navy cardigan, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Behind her, the Whitmore mansion glowed beneath warm chandelier light, polished silver reflecting across a table set for 12. Andrew, a 46-year-old billionaire who had built his fortune by making decisions faster than almost anyone around him, stared at the little girl. "What did you say?" Nia swallowed, then looked toward the open kitchen doors. "The new chef. Please don't let him cook tonight." Andrew followed her gaze. Daniel Voss stood beneath the pendant lights, calm and immaculate in his white chef's jacket. He was preparing the first course for Andrew's private dinner, moving with the confidence of a man who had spent years in expensive kitchens. His resume had impressed Andrew. His references were flawless. Even the head of household staff had described him as unusually reliable. Daniel looked up, noticed Nia watching him, and offered a polite smile. She immediately looked back at Andrew. "Why?" Andrew asked. Nia hesitated. "I saw something." "Something dangerous?" She shook her head. "I don't know." That answer made Andrew pause. Nia had never been the kind of child who invented stories for attention. She noticed details. She remembered things adults forgot. But Andrew also knew how easily a new face could make a child uncomfortable. "Nia," he said gently, lowering his voice. "Daniel was carefully screened before he came here." "I know." Her voice remained soft. "That's why I'm scared nobody will believe me." Across the room, Daniel placed a small silver tray on the counter. The faint sound of metal touching marble carried through the house. Nia's eyes followed his hands. Andrew noticed something change in her expression. It wasn't panic. It was recognition. "What did you see?" he asked. She stepped closer. "A key." Andrew frowned. "A key?" Nia nodded. "A little silver key. He put it in his pocket when he thought nobody was looking." Andrew glanced toward the kitchen again. Daniel was speaking with the housekeeper now, smiling as if nothing in the world could possibly be wrong. "Lots of people carry keys," Andrew said. Nia looked up at him. "Not that one." Before Andrew could ask another question, Daniel turned from the counter. For one brief second, his eyes met Nia's. His smile remained perfectly polite, but his right hand moved instinctively toward the pocket of his jacket. Nia noticed. So did Andrew. The room seemed to grow quieter around them. Andrew slowly set down his glass. For the first time that evening, the billionaire wasn't thinking about the dinner, the guests, or the business deal waiting for him after dessert. He was thinking about one small silver key, and why an 8-year-old girl had been so certain that he should never let the new chef cook that night. Andrew did not move for several seconds. The dinner guests continued their quiet conversations around him, unaware that his attention had shifted completely to the kitchen. Nia remained beside him, watching Daniel with the careful focus of someone trying to remember every detail. "Tell me exactly what you saw," Andrew said. Nia glanced toward the dining room doors before answering. "This afternoon, I was looking for the blue serving tray near the kitchen. I heard someone opening the cabinet under the stairs." Andrew frowned. "The cabinet under the stairs?" She nodded. "It was Daniel. He looked around first. Then he took something out." "What did he take?" "I could not see. But when he noticed me, he closed the door." Andrew studied her face. She was not guessing. She was trying to separate what she knew from what she did not. That mattered to him. "And the key?" he asked. "I saw it later. He used it on a small drawer in the kitchen." Andrew looked toward the kitchen again. Daniel was now arranging plates with precise movements. Nothing about him seemed unusual. In fact, everything about him seemed almost too ordinary. Andrew quietly walked toward the kitchen, with Nia following a few steps behind. Daniel noticed them immediately. "Mr. Whitmore," he said warmly. "The first course will be ready in about 10 minutes. Andrew gave him a polite nod. "Everything going smoothly?" "Perfectly." Daniel smiled. "Your kitchen staff have been very helpful." Andrew's eyes moved across the counters. Fresh vegetables, bread, herbs, clean utensils. Everything appeared exactly as it should. He opened one cabinet, then another. Nothing. Daniel remained calm. "Looking for something?" he asked. "Just checking the setup," Andrew replied. Nia stood near the doorway, silent. Her eyes suddenly fixed on Daniel's jacket pocket. The silver key was no longer there. Andrew noticed her expression. He turned toward Daniel. "Where did you put the key you had earlier?" Daniel paused for the briefest moment. What key? Nia answered before Andrew could. The silver one. Daniel looked at her. His expression remained friendly, but his smile faded slightly. I do not know what you mean. Andrew watched the exchange carefully. Then Daniel reached into another pocket and produced a small brass key. This is the only key I have been given for the kitchen storage room. He placed it on the counter. Nia shook her head. That is not the one. Daniel gave a quiet laugh. Perhaps you saw someone else. Andrew looked at Nia, then at Daniel. For a moment, he wondered if the entire warning had been built around a simple misunderstanding. Then Nia pointed toward the hallway. Mr. Whitmore, can I show you something? Andrew followed her out of the kitchen. She led him to a narrow corridor where a security monitor displayed several camera feeds from the house. Nia pointed at the screen showing the kitchen entrance. Look at the clock. Andrew leaned closer. The timestamp read 7:18 p.m. He checked the wall clock. It read 7:29 p.m. His eyes narrowed. 11 minutes were missing. He looked at Nia. She whispered. That is the part one could not explain. Behind them, somewhere in the kitchen, a drawer closed softly. Andrew stared at the security monitor, his expression changing as the 11-minute gap became impossible to ignore. Show me the recording before 7:18, he said quietly. Nia stood beside him, watching the screen without speaking. The security system displayed the kitchen entrance, the pantry, and the hallway leading toward the dining room. At 7:06 p.m., Daniel appeared on camera carrying a wooden crate. At 7:11 p.m., he disappeared through the kitchen doorway. Then the screen jumped to 7:18 p.m. Andrew checked the system twice. There should be footage here. Nia nodded. That is what I was trying to tell you. Andrew picked up his phone and called Marcus Lee, the head of household security. Marcus, come to the monitor room. Bring the access records for the kitchen. Within minutes, Marcus arrived with a tablet in his hand. He was a careful man who had worked for Andrew for almost 7 years. Andrew pointed at the screen. There is an 11-minute gap. Marcus looked at the timestamp and then at the tablet. That is strange. He pulled up the digital access log. The system shows no interruption. Andrew frowned. But the camera clearly jumps from 7:07 to 7:18. Marcus checked again. The server says the recording is complete. Nia stepped closer to the monitor. It is not complete. Marcus looked down at her. What makes you say that? Nia pointed at the image. Look at the clock above the kitchen door. Andrew leaned forward. The clock on the wall showed 7:07 in one frame and 7:18 in the next. But the steam rising from a pot on the stove looked almost exactly the same. Nothing in the kitchen appeared to have changed. No plates moved. No person crossed the doorway. It was as if 11 minutes had simply vanished. Andrew felt a quiet uneasiness settle over him. Can you recover the missing footage? He asked. Marcus nodded. I can try. He connected the tablet to the security server and began checking the archived files. Nia remained silent until she noticed something in the corner of another camera feed. Wait. Andrew turned. What is it? She pointed toward the hallway camera. A figure had appeared there at 7:09 p.m. The image was distant and slightly blurred, but the person was carrying something rectangular under one arm. Marcus enlarged the image. Andrew stared. That is not Daniel. Nia shook her head. I told you. Marcus checked the hallway access record. Nothing had been logged. Andrew's jaw tightened. Someone had moved through the house without appearing in the access system. Then Marcus enlarged another frame. The figure stopped near the study door and looked directly toward the camera. Andrew recognized the suit immediately. It belonged to Richard Hale, his longtime business advisor, and one of the few people who had unrestricted access to the estate. Andrew's phone vibrated. A message appeared from Daniel. Dinner is ready, Mr. Whitmore. Andrew slowly lowered the phone. Nia looked up at him. What are you going to do? Andrew glanced at the screen again. First, I am going to find out what happened during those 11 minutes. He paused. And nobody is going to know that we are looking. Andrew waited until Marcus closed the monitor room door before speaking. Do not tell anyone about the missing footage, he said. Marcus nodded immediately. Nia stood quietly near the doorway, her eyes moving between the two men. What about Daniel? She asked. Andrew looked at her. We are not accusing him of anything yet. But you think he knows something. Andrew paused. I think we need facts before we make a decision. A few minutes later, Andrew returned to the dining room as though nothing unusual had happened. The guests were still talking beneath the warm chandelier light. and the smell of roasted herbs drifted from the kitchen. Daniel stepped forward with a confident smile. "The first course is ready, Mr. Whitmore." Andrew returned the smile. "Excellent." He took his seat, but did not touch the plate in front of him. Nia sat several chairs away with her guardian, watching quietly. Daniel moved from guest to guest, explaining each dish with professional ease. Nothing about his behavior suggested nervousness. If anything, he seemed more comfortable than before. Andrew studied him carefully. Then he noticed something small. Daniel kept his left hand away from the inside pocket of his jacket, the same pocket where Nia had seen the silver key. "Mr. Voss," Andrew said casually, "where did you train before coming here?" Daniel answered without hesitation. "New York, mostly. A few years in Chicago. Then I worked with a private family in Connecticut." His resume matched what Andrew remembered. "And you have never worked for Whitmore Holdings?" Andrew asked. Daniel smiled. "No, sir." Nia looked up. Andrew caught the movement, but said nothing. Dinner continued. After the first course, Andrew excused himself and walked toward his study. Nia followed a moment later. "You noticed something?" he said. She nodded. "He told you he never worked for your company." "Yes. But that is not true." Andrew stopped walking. "How do you know?" Nia pointed toward the framed photographs along the hallway. "Because I saw him before tonight." Andrew followed her gaze to a photograph from 6 years earlier. It showed Andrew standing beside several executives at the opening of a new Whitmore facility. In the far corner stood a younger man wearing a dark suit and holding a folder. Andrew stepped closer. His eyes narrowed. The face was partly turned away, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Daniel Voss had been there. Andrew took the photograph from the wall and examined the date. 6 years ago. Nia looked at him. "That is him." Andrew felt the pieces beginning to shift. Daniel had not simply appeared at the estate with a clean resume. He had a history with Whitmore Holdings that he had not mentioned. Before Andrew could speak, footsteps sounded behind them. Daniel stood at the end of the hallway. His expression was calm, but his eyes had changed. "Looking for something, Mr. Whitmore?" Andrew slowly turned toward him. "Actually, yes." He held up the photograph. "I think I just found it." Daniel looked at the picture. For the first time that evening, he did not smile. Nia quietly reached for Andrew's hand. The hallway seemed suddenly still. Daniel took one measured breath. "You should hear my explanation before you decide what this means." Andrew lowered the photograph. "Then explain." Daniel looked directly at him. "I was hoping you would never find that picture. I was hoping you would never find that picture." Daniel's words settled over the hallway like a sudden silence. Andrew kept the photograph in his hand, studying the younger face in the corner. "Then you knew it existed." Daniel nodded slowly. "Yes." Nia stood close to Andrew, watching him carefully. Andrew looked at Daniel. 6 years ago, you were at one of my facilities. Tonight, you told me you had never worked for Whitmore Holdings." Daniel lowered his eyes for a moment. "I said I had never worked for Whitmore Holdings as an employee." Andrew's expression hardened with confusion. "That sounds like a distinction you prepared in advance." Daniel gave a faint, tired smile. "Because I knew someday someone would ask." Before Andrew could respond, footsteps sounded from the dining room. Marcus appeared at the end of the hall and quietly handed Andrew a tablet. "Sir, we recovered part of the missing footage." Andrew glanced at the screen. The recording from 7:08 p.m. showed Daniel entering the kitchen hallway. A few seconds later, Richard Hale appeared on the same camera. Richard stopped near the study door and spoke briefly with Daniel. There was no sound, but their expressions were serious. Then Richard handed Daniel a small envelope. Daniel accepted it and placed it inside his jacket. Andrew looked up. "What was in the envelope?" Daniel answered immediately. "I do not know." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "You accepted it?" "Yes." "From Richard?" "Yes." "And you still expect me to believe you came here for an ordinary cooking job?" Daniel took a slow breath. "No. I expect you to believe that I came here for a reason, but not the reason you think." Nia looked toward Daniel. "Then why did you hide it?" Daniel turned to her. His voice softened. "Because I did not know who I could trust." Andrew looked at the tablet again. "Start from the beginning." Daniel hesitated. 6 years ago, I worked for a company that Whitmore Holdings acquired. I was not an executive. I was an assistant in the operations department. Andrew nodded. "I remember the acquisition. There was a financial report that disappeared before the deal was completed," Daniel continued. "Several employees noticed numbers that did not make sense. One of them was my father." Andrew lowered the tablet. "Your father?" Daniel nodded. His name was Samuel Voss. He believed someone had altered the records. He tried to report it. Nia listened quietly. What happened after that? She asked. Daniel looked toward the floor. He lost his position. The investigation went nowhere. He spent years trying to prove what he had found. Andrew's face changed. And you believe Richard was involved? Daniel did not answer immediately. That silence was enough. Andrew turned toward the study. Why come here as a chef? Daniel finally said. Because I found evidence that the missing report was connected to this house. Andrew stopped. What evidence? Daniel reached inside his jacket, but before he could remove anything, a voice came from the dining room. Andrew. Richard Hale was approaching them. Is everything all right? Daniel immediately stepped back. Nia looked at Andrew. Her eyes moved toward Daniel's jacket, then toward Richard. She whispered, That is the person you should be watching. Richard Hale stopped a few feet away, his expression calm beneath the warm hallway lights. Is everything all right? He asked again. Andrew studied him for a moment before answering. Everything is fine. Richard glanced toward Daniel. I was looking for you earlier. The dinner service is going well, I hope. Daniel gave a polite nod. Everything is under control. Nia watched them both without speaking. Andrew noticed the way her eyes moved from Richard to Daniel and then to the study door. She was connecting details again. Richard, Andrew said, what were you doing near the study at 7:09 tonight? For the first time, Richard hesitated. It lasted less than a second, but Andrew noticed. I was checking the guest list, Richard replied. You know I often help with those arrangements. Andrew nodded slowly. Of course. Richard smiled. Is there a problem? Not yet. Richard gave a small laugh, then looked toward Nia. I assume she is the reason for all these questions. Nia remained quiet. Richard's voice was gentle, almost reassuring. She is a very observant child. Andrew watched him carefully. That is what I am beginning to understand. Richard turned toward Daniel. And you? Daniel said nothing. Richard's eyes lingered on him for a moment before returning to Andrew. If you need anything, you know where to find me. He walked toward the dining room, leaving the three of them in the hallway. Andrew waited until Richard was out of earshot. Daniel, what was in the envelope? Daniel reached into his jacket and carefully removed a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to Andrew. The page contained several numbers, dates, and account references. Andrew scanned the first few lines. His expression changed. Where did you get this? Daniel answered. From an archived file connected to the old acquisition. Andrew read further. The document appeared to show transfers between two companies, but one of the names was unfamiliar. What is Northbridge Consulting? He asked. Daniel looked at him. That is the company that received the money. Andrew's eyes narrowed. And who owns it? Daniel hesitated. That is what I have been trying to prove. Nia stepped closer to the paper. What about the clock? She asked. Andrew looked at her. What do you mean? The 11 minutes. If Richard was in the hallway, maybe he knows why the camera stopped. Daniel's expression changed. The camera did not stop by itself. Andrew turned toward him. How do you know? Daniel looked toward the dining room. Because the person who gave me the envelope told me the security system had been changed before I arrived. Andrew's voice became quieter. Who told you? Daniel looked directly at him. Richard. The hallway seemed to become still again. Andrew glanced toward the dining room, where Richard was now speaking casually with one of the guests. The man looked completely relaxed. Daniel lowered his voice. I did not come here to expose you, Mr. Whitmore. I came here because I believed someone inside your organization was hiding something from you. Nia looked up at Andrew. Then we should check the study. Andrew nodded. He turned to Marcus. Lock the archived security files. No one accesses them without me. Marcus immediately moved toward the monitor room. Andrew, Daniel, and Nia walked toward the study. Before they reached the door, Andrew noticed something unusual. The small silver key Nia had described was resting on the floor beside the baseboard. He bent down and picked it up. A tiny number was engraved on its surface, 17. Nia stared at it. That is the number on the cabinet. Andrew looked toward the kitchen. The answer was no longer hiding in plain sight. It was waiting behind a locked drawer. The silver key felt surprisingly light in Andrew's hand, yet the small number 17 seemed to carry the weight of an answer he had been missing for years. He looked at Daniel, then at Nia. Stay close, he said quietly. The three of them entered the study while the dinner continued behind them, unaware of what was unfolding just beyond the closed doors. Andrew walked to the built-in cabinet along the far wall. It contained old business files, family documents, and several locked drawers he rarely opened. 17, Nia whispered. Andrew counted the drawers from the bottom. The 17th drawer was narrow and almost invisible beneath the larger compartments. He inserted the key. It turned with a soft click. Inside was a small black box, a folded envelope, and an old pocket watch. Andrew stared at the watch. That belonged to my father. Daniel stepped closer. That is the item I was looking for. Andrew looked sharply at him. Why? Daniel pointed toward the envelope. Because I believe that document can explain what happened 6 years ago. Andrew opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a single typed page bearing the logo of Whitmore Holdings. The date was from 3 weeks before the acquisition Daniel had described. Andrew read the first lines, then stopped. This is an internal audit request. Daniel nodded. My father received a copy. Andrew continued reading. The report mentioned irregular transfers, unexplained consulting fees, and a missing financial record. One company name appeared repeatedly. Northbridge Consulting. Andrew felt a chill of recognition. Richard approved several of these payments. Daniel said nothing. Nia looked at the old pocket watch. Does it have something inside? Andrew examined it. The back had a tiny seam he had never noticed before. He pressed the edge, and the cover opened. Inside was a folded piece of paper no larger than a postage stamp. Andrew unfolded it. 4 numbers were written across the paper. Daniel leaned closer. Those are account codes. Andrew looked at him. How do you know? Because my father wrote them down in his notes. Andrew studied the numbers again. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Marcus appeared. Sir, someone just attempted to access the archived security files. Andrew's eyes narrowed. Who? Another message appeared. The request came through Richard Hale's authorization. Daniel looked at Andrew. Now you understand why I was afraid to tell you. Andrew placed the paper beside the audit report. I understand why you were afraid. I do not understand why Richard would risk everything for an old financial record. Nia spoke softly. Maybe it is not old to him. Andrew looked at her. She pointed toward the document. The date is 6 years ago, but the numbers are still being used. Andrew reread the report. She was right. One of the account codes appeared beside a transaction dated only 3 months earlier. His expression changed completely. The old investigation was not finished. Someone had continued moving money through the same network long after Andrew believed the matter was closed. Then the study door opened. Richard stood in the doorway. His voice remained calm. Andrew, we need to talk. Andrew slowly closed the pocket watch. I agree. Richard looked at the documents on the desk. For one brief moment, his composure disappeared. Nia noticed it first. She reached for Andrew's sleeve and whispered, He knows you found it. Andrew looked at Richard and finally understood something important. The missing 11 minutes were never the real mystery. They were only the moment someone realized the truth was about to be discovered. Richard stepped fully into the study and quietly closed the door behind him. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The warm light from the desk lamp fell across the old audit report, the pocket watch, and the small paper containing the account codes. Andrew remained standing beside the desk, while Nia stayed close to him and Daniel watched Richard carefully. You found the report, Richard said at last. Andrew did not answer immediately. You already knew it was here. Richard looked at the documents. I knew. There was an old file in this house. I did not know whether it was still here. Daniel spoke quietly. You knew enough to change the security system. Richard turned toward him. You have no idea what you are talking about. Andrew raised one hand. Enough. I want answers. Richard took a slow breath. 6 years ago, your company was going through a difficult acquisition. There were accounting irregularities. Several employees raised concerns. The board reviewed them. And then, Andrew asked. Richard looked at him. The investigation concluded that the discrepancies were administrative errors. Daniel shook his head. That is not what happened. Richard ignored him. Your father was under enormous pressure at the time, Andrew. He made decisions based on incomplete information. Andrew looked down at the report. Then why was this document hidden? Richard's silence lasted a little too long. Nia noticed. Because somebody was afraid you would read it, she said. Richard looked at her. Children often see patterns that adults imagine they understand. Andrew turned toward him. That sounds almost like a compliment. Richard gave a faint smile. It was. Then Marcus called from the hallway. Mr. Whitmore, I recovered another security file. Andrew opened the study door. Marcus handed him the tablet. This is from the backup server. The missing 11 minutes were not deleted. They were redirected. Andrew looked at the screen. Redirected where? Marcus pointed to a private archive folder labeled with an internal code. Andrew opened it. A single video file appeared. The timestamp showed 7:09 p.m., the exact moment Richard had been near the study. Andrew pressed play. The recording showed Richard entering the hallway, stopping near the study, and speaking with Daniel. But there was something unexpected. Richard handed Daniel the envelope, then pointed toward the locked cabinet. Daniel looked surprised. He had not opened it. He had only accepted the envelope. Andrew paused the video. So you were not working together? Daniel shook his head. No, Richard looked away. Daniel was trying to find the report. I wanted him to stop looking. Andrew stared at him. Why? Richard finally answered. Because the person who originally altered the records was not me. The room became silent. Daniel looked at him in disbelief. Richard continued. I discovered the truth years later. By then, the damage had already been done. Andrew looked at the account codes again. Then who owns Northbridge Consulting? Richard hesitated. Nia quietly stepped toward the desk and pointed at the pocket watch. Maybe the watch knows. Andrew opened it again. Beneath the hidden paper was a second inscription, almost invisible in the light. It contained a name. Andrew read it once. Then again. His face went still. The name belonged to someone he had trusted for nearly 20 years. Richard whispered. Now you understand why I could not tell you. Andrew looked at Nia. She had been right from the beginning. The new chef was not the real danger. He was the person who had come looking for the truth. And somewhere inside Andrew's own circle was the person who had spent 6 years making sure that truth stayed hidden.